Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've got a great session planned. We've got an hour together, and I want to really share with you some key ideas about how leaders and managers can leverage AI in their organization and for their teams. I've promoted this as mistakes that leaders make with AI, but I want to be little bit more positive around that, and let's talk about things that you can actually do moving forward. Like I'll talk about the mistakes, but I want to really focus on the things that are positive that we can do to move forward. So my regular rules of engagement for all my presentations, I've got three of them, and one of them I'm particularly going to focus on today. But my three rules of engagement are, I want you to think a little bit differently and think a bit broader than you normally would in your everyday work life or your workplace, and even in your personal life, because it's easier to do that and then step things back when life gets in the way than the other way around. The second thing is be playful, like be interactive in this session. So if you're watching the recording later, hello to you. You miss out on the live interaction. But if you're here in the room, please take advantage of the opportunity to engage not only with me, but with other people in the room as well. In fact, on that point, let me just suggest to you that quite often is challenging when you're in an online meeting to know what's happening in the room. So if you use those little reaction buttons there, and as we go through, but I'll ask you to do that now. So if I ask you, don't type in the chat, but if I ask you, how do you feel about AI at the moment? So if you can use one of those little reaction buttons, one of those emojis, and let's see how people are feeling. Okay, so we should see them coming up. So it's good to see. There's the people who are excited about it, people who are laughing, they're saying it's funny. Okay, that's good. I'm glad to see that. That's really good. Glad to see. Let me quickly get that going again. Okay, good. Good. So I can see there's lots of people who are positive about AI, and I'm really pleased to see that. So as we go through, if you if you use those emoji buttons, then I'll know, and also the rest of the room will know as well, because I've enabled a feature so everybody else in the room can see what's happening with these emojis as well. Okay, and my third rule today is I want to give you some real things that you can take away and put into action. Of those three rules, the one that I think is most important today is to think differently. See, I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission to get people thinking differently about AI. There's a lot of talk about AI at the moment. You don't need me to tell you that, but a lot of that is around the AI technology, the infrastructure, policies, and things that we want to put into place. And these are all important, but I think there's another way of using AI in a really practical way, and I want to share that with you today. It's a process that I use with many of my clients when we actually look at implementing and integrating AI in your workplace, and it's a different mindset around AI. So we'll get to that. So I've been using AI for a long time. Some people here know this, that more than 30 years ago, when I was studying at the University of Western Australia, my computer science thesis was about AI. So I like to say I've been tracking and following AI since the 1900s. But of course, it's changed a lot since then. And now, since the launch of ChatGPT, everybody's talking about it, and some people are doing things about it as well. I've noticed that in the last year, especially the last 6 months, it's not necessarily like I'm seeing less people talking about it's going to destroy humanity and we're doomed, and now looking at how do we roll up our sleeves and get some practical value from it. So just to be really clear about who this session is for, ideally I'd like to know, well, I'm going to tell you who specifically this session is going to be most valuable for. If you don't fit into this category, that's fine, but if you do, that's really valuable. But before we do that, I'd actually like to know, where are you from? So where are you based at the moment? So I think most people here are from Australia and New Zealand. If you can type in the chat, please, just which city or town you're from. And we should see. We'll see where everyone is joining from. Okay, so a lot of people from my home state of Western Australia. There's some people from other parts of Asia. Wow, a lot of people. can see her typing in from Perth. But as I said, most people are from Australia and New Zealand. So I will say that a lot of what I talk about today is relevant to everybody in the world. However, I've got a couple of little bits of research that are specifically around Australia. Okay, good. Thank you. So we've even got people from Port Hedland. And yeah, good. Thank you for doing that. So coming back to who are you, it's really this is my goal today is to work with and give you some ideas for people who are like leaders and managers of a team who are, I'm using this phrase AI positive here. One of the people I follow, Joanna Penn, who has got a lot of futuristic ideas. She talks about this idea of being AI positive. So you're kind of already on board with the idea of AI. You want to use it, you want to leverage it. You may not be sure how, you're not skeptical about it, or you're appropriately skeptical about it, and you're careful about it, but you are definitely saying, I'm AI positive, I'm on the board, I'm on board with this, now help me do things with it. And you're not necessarily a leader of a tech team or an IT team. I think there are many people in IT teams here who are really good at AI and they're already well on the path. If you are in that area, then I think you'll still get value from this. But I'm saying here, you don't necessarily need to be in that mold. So this is for any leader or team in an organization who's looking to get more out of AI from their team. Okay, so before we get into this process and how you can get value from it, I'd like to know what's getting in your way. And the way I'll ask you to do this is, please, if in the chat you can type in 1 or 2 words. If you make it longer than that, then it won't appear here. 1 or 2 words, we've said there are locations, so we'll remove that for the moment. 1 or 2 words of what's getting in the way of you implementing or integrating AI in your team or in your organization. Okay, so there's a number of things here. Knowledge seems to be number 1, and there's different versions of that as well, of course. Knowledge deficit and things I can see coming through the chat. Trust, mistrust, where to start, not enough knowledge, tech resistant. Good, thank you. Thanks everyone for sharing that and for being honest about that, because there are a lot of things at the moment that I think get in the way of leaders using AI effectively. And my plan here is that I want to give you some things that will help alleviate some of the things getting in the way. At the end of this presentation, before we end, I'll ask the same question again, and I'll ask you to write in the chat like what's getting in the way now, and if we have time, we'll address some of those issues as well. There's some research done by this organization called AIPRM. They do a whole bunch of research around AI statistics, and one of the things they looked at is like where how countries are placed in terms of AI readiness. So they looked at things like what are governments doing, what sort of IT infrastructure is available, what are laws and regulations around using AI, are they enabling or they're restricting, what are organizations doing at different sizes, and so on, and how many organizations are using it. They said Australia is ranked number 31 in the world in AI readiness. So just for a bit of fun, I have had a look at some other countries, and I've got this little poll for you. We're number 31 in AI readiness. Which of these 4 countries is higher on the list? If you type in the chat A, B, C or D, so not the name of the country, but A, B, C or D. Malaysia, Bulgaria, Cyprus or Belarus. We'll see the results as they're coming in. Yep, interesting. One of our nearest neighbours is coming up as the highest rated. Okay, good. Okay, so the correct answer is all of them. So all of these 4 countries, as well as 26 others, are rated higher than we are when it comes to AI readiness. Now, the reason I showed you that is it's useful to know that here's where we're ranked globally, but I also want to make the point that in some ways this isn't relevant. It doesn't matter whether we're ranked number 1 or number 31 or number 131. What really matters is what we do individually in our teams and organizations to use AI effectively. So I think if you're going to use if you're using Australia's ranking, that could be really valuable if you're looking at big picture projects and you're looking at policy. But for any organization, you can use AI more effectively regardless of where we're ranked. Okay, so let's get into these 3 big problems with AI and 3 ways to overcome them. By the way, when I first promoted this, we talked about 4 mistakes that leaders are making, but then I realized that 2 of them are very similar, and also based on the feedback that people gave me about the challenges they're facing, I've combined 2 of them into one. So now we've got the 3 major mistakes that people are making with AI and what you can do about it. So what we'll do is we'll go through these, but I'll also stop and give you the chance to ask me questions about them as we go. Okay, so the first one is that many leaders and teams looking at AI, they focus on the wrong things. So they see all this fancy stuff that AI can do, and instead of looking at it as solving a problem, they get overwhelmed by it, or sometimes underwhelmed by it, because they say it's not particularly useful. So the sort of responses I got, and thank you for the people who wrote back and said these are the biggest challenges we're facing, the sort of things are this. So one person said, and I'm keeping this anonymous, I can't figure out a use for it. Most of the time when I use it, it just rephrases what I tell it and doesn't make much of a contribution. I saw somebody else in the chat also to write, when I ask it to do some writing, it doesn't do a very good job of it. Somebody on LinkedIn I saw recently, and I didn't reply to this because I didn't want to publicly make this comment when they could see what their name was, but they said AI is just aggregator of information. That's all it does. It can't be innovative, it can't be creative, and that's a very, very limited view of AI. If you're using it as an aggregator of information, it does a really good job of that, but it's got a much, much wider scope as well. And here's another one. This is somebody who wrote specifically, and might be in the room today actually, as a principal in a small country school, how do I start the AI journey? And I saw that came up earlier as well when I said what's getting in the way, how do we get started? And the way to get started is, as I showed you earlier, is solve a problem. Figure out a problem that you want solved or a goal that you want to achieve, and then figure out how AI can help you on that journey to solve that problem. That sounds obvious. It may sound obvious, and yet I find that many people who are starting the AI journey, they look around and they say there's all these AI tools, I don't know what to do with them, I get overwhelmed by it. What should I do? I can't learn it all. And the answer is yes, you can't learn it all. So identify real problems that you want to solve in your workplace, and then look at applying AI to those problems. And if you want to narrow that down even further, when you identify problems in your workplace, look at them as the problem that you want to solve is going to do one of 4 things. So the solution is either going to save you or make you money. It can save you time or increase your productivity. It can reduce stress and anxiety and increase wellness, or it can increase engagement. And engagement can be internal within the organization for employees within the organization, other internal stakeholders, or it can be external. It can be increasing engagement with customers and other external stakeholders. So when you're identifying problems that you want solved, then look at it in one of these 4 areas. I'm actually going to give you the opportunity a little bit later to write down in the chat and share the sort of problems that you're looking to solve. Okay, but before we do that, I want to talk about the latest version of ChatGPT. So OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, had a huge launch last week, releasing the latest version of ChatGPT. Can I just quickly ask in the room, can I ask you to just type in yes or no to this question? Have you seen demonstrations of the new version of ChatGPT? Can you just type yes or no? Just want to get a feel of where we're up to in the room. It was only launched last week. Okay, so most people haven't seen it, and not surprising. It's not your job to be looking out for the latest launch of AI products, and that's my job, and that's to share it with you. But okay, so most people haven't seen it yet. It's quite impressive if you get the chance to look at it and you just search YouTube for examples of our latest demo of ChatGPT. For the people who haven't seen it, can you just type in the chat? Sorry, people who have seen it, people who type in the chat, what have you seen that's impressive? And I'll just share a couple of examples coming up in the room here. What have you seen that's impressive with the new version of ChatGPT? Okay, so just to give you some ideas of what they're doing things like so John says memory retention is better than in earlier models, so it remembers from your past conversations. Better augmentation. It has natural conversation. So a lot of people have been wowed by this idea that ChatGPT now allows you to have, so it speaks to you. It can speak rather than you just typing in chat. Instead of you just typing in chat, so accuracy is better, it's more current data, and it can actually have natural conversations. And conversations not just in chat, but in it actually will speak to you as well. And it'll listen to you, and it can understand you, and it can you can hold up your camera to the room, and it can tell you what's happening in the room. There's some really cool demonstrations of that. I think the most useful and the most valuable feature of ChatGPT, the new version of ChatGPT, is that now almost everything that was only available to paid subscribers is now available in the free version. Okay, almost everything. So all the stuff that was previously hidden behind the premium version is now available to the free users. So and that makes it really, really powerful. And we can speculate about why they did that. I think it's because they think that having millions of people training its database is going to be more valuable than charging people 30 Aussie dollars a month for that service. Okay, so that means that we've now got access to a much more powerful version of AI. So, for example, I'll give you some examples of some of the things that some of my clients are doing with AI right now. So they're doing these things. I've anonymized these because obviously these are confidential. I don't want people to know what projects my clients are doing. They don't want you to know. But I've given you some examples of the typical sort of things that people are doing with AI projects. Not necessarily ChatGPT, but they're doing projects like this. Take our training videos and translate them into different languages. For organizations that have a lot of casual and shift workers, rostering and scheduling is a big task. So they want AI to be able to do that for them, or at least do a lot of the heavy lifting around that. I was working with a tourism operator. I can say that without going any further. And she realized that a lot of her future customers are on Facebook, and she'd never used Facebook before, so she wanted a 6-month Facebook marketing campaign, and she wanted AI to not only create the campaign but also teach her how to do Facebook marketing without her having to employ a social media consultant to do that. Or if she employs a social media consultant, she can give them the information that she's already researched. Another example, to create VR training videos for onboarding staff, especially staff who are in dangerous situations like on mine sites, and a couple of others. There are a lot of organizations which have got a lot of detailed policies and procedures, and it would be really useful to have a chatbot that would help to help employees find the right material within that whole morass of documents. Another example, the last one I'll give you as an example here, is to automate manual processing of orders and invoices. So this was somebody who works in procurement, and they have to do things like they get quotes from suppliers, then they raise a purchase order, they get an invoice, they have to pay it at a certain time, and all of that, it's all digital of course, but it means opening emails, opening attachments, saving them, copying them across to other pieces of software and so on, and going through approvals. And she wants AI to automate that process. So those are some of the examples of projects that people are actually doing with AI right now. Okay, and I know this because my clients are doing versions of these. Okay, so let me ask you, what projects are you doing with AI? Just type in the chat and I'll share a couple of them. And again, this is a public presentation, so just type whatever you're willing to do and are willing to share, and we'll just see what people are doing. And if you've got none, as somebody said, that's okay, that's all right. We're happy to. Let me share a couple. So AI. So Caroline says using AI integrations in existing programs. John, yeah, so social media posts and comments, summarizing articles. Tony says developing an EVP, great. Yeah, Sue says like rewriting clauses and also doing marketing. So a lot of AI use at the moment is around looking at text documents and making them better and updating them. And I'll just share John's one here as well. It's AI has a lot of AI use is around research. Okay, and there's some people who are saying we're not using AI yet, which is good. That's why you're here, right? I'm going to give you some ways that you can use it. You can use it really effectively. Okay. So let's move on to this second area here, which is around the mistake that many organizations are making. Not so much the leaders, but organizations are making, and then the leaders kind of follow on with that, is they're trying to get things perfect before they can get started. So they feel that they need to have an organizational strategy around AI before they can start using it internally. And many smaller businesses, even solo operators, are just going ahead and doing it because they don't have that structure. They don't have the need to fit within that organizational structure first. And I reckon there's a good middle ground where if you're a leader within an organization and you have got you've got a team, you've got the resources of the organization, and you want to get things done quickly, you absolutely can do that. So for example, somebody who replied to my question about challenges said, which apps and features should I use? I'm feeling overwhelmed by it. And also, like, it's not only apps and features, it's about the AI policy of organization, what IT allows us to use, and so on. There are some of these big picture things. And I think there's a different way. So coming back to what I said earlier, this is the area where I'm going to try and persuade you to think differently about your AI projects. Okay, so this is the one where my job here, and I'm telling you up front, is to convince you that there's a different way of doing AI, and it's by running projects. So, and what I mean by that is if you think that there's a best way to do things and there's a fast way to do things. So best is, if you like, let's call it perfect. Okay, so you can get it perfect or you can get results. And of course, there's a middle ground between them. But I reckon if you're a leader or a manager within an organization, lean towards the fast solutions, not necessarily the perfect ones. Okay, so if we talk about best or perfect, don't try and do this yet and don't wait for this to happen. Let's look at some of the fast things. So let me give you some 4 principles around that. So to give examples, so the best way to get your organization AI enabled is to create your organization as an AI first organization or a digital first or an AI enabled organization. And there are many organizations right now going through this process of some sort of process transformation. It's pre-AI, it was called digital transformation. Now they're saying AI transformation. This is good, but it takes time, money, a huge bunch of resources. So instead of that, focus on quick wins that you can get with AI right now. In fact, one of the groups I was working with, we've started a process, which I'll mention in a few minutes, on Monday. And we did this first workshop with a group of leaders in this organization. And somebody in the group said to me, we're looking at these quick wins and these small projects, but also if we get the big picture stuff right, some of these small projects may be redundant. So should we still focus on the small projects? And I said, yes. If you had the big picture problems done and you were an AI ready organization, then of course you don't need to do the small projects. But that big picture transformation can take months, in some cases even years. I know one other organization who is, look, they didn't tell me this confidentially, but I'll keep it confidential. And they've embarked on a 2-year process to create the perfect AI environment for their organization before they allow their employees to use it. So there's 2 years that they're going to be, in 2 years' time, it'll be perfect. But in the 2 years, the employees aren't allowed to really use AI in really effective ways. Okay, so don't look for transformation. Don't wait for transformation. Go for the quick wins. Similarly, don't wait till your organization has an AI strategy, organization-wide. Look at running AI projects, and we'll get to this in a minute. Now, also, another thing is that, so I've been talking to clients about AI for at least 10 years now, and in the early days of it, like 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago, the way to do AI was to get some software, AI software, or build it, and then train it on your own data. So it could be customer data, employee data, mining data that you get from instruments and so on. And then your AI would be able to work on that data. That is still the best way, the perfect way to do it, because it's now working on a narrow band of data. What we've now found since the launch of ChatGPT is that these big AI tools like ChatGPT or Copilot or Google Gemini or Claude Anthropic, or all these things that have been trained on general and generic data are pretty good at solving a lot of problems. Okay, so now we can use pre-trained AI. By the way, people ask me what GPT stands for. The P stands for pre-trained. Okay, then that's made a huge difference. And people 5, 10 years ago weren't expecting that. They thought AI had to be a big job. You had to train it on your own data. Okay, and the last one around the big principle, the big picture versus doing things fast, is that the perfect way of doing it is AI in your organization is IT driven. Okay, along with other senior management, of course, but it's IT driven. And I would rather that your AI projects are people driven. So instead of waiting for the IT department to create the perfect infrastructure for AI, you run some projects and then you go to IT and say, hey, we need access to this. And they help you out with that area. Okay, so those are the 4 principles. Those are 4 principles around, rather than going big, start small and do it fast. Now, with all of that said, you can't just start any old AI project that you want to in your organization, because of course there are restrictions, there are limitations, there are biases, there are ethical considerations when you're using AI. But if you're running those sort of projects, can I say to you, yeah, absolutely, you need to do it properly, but you don't have to. Those are not the only ways to get value from AI. Okay, so I'm going to show you a very quick process. I'll take you quickly through the process that I use with many of my clients around this. And by the way, somebody else I follow in the AI space is Ethan Mollick. I don't recommend you follow him. He talks at more of a high level technical view around AI, and it's not relevant. I need to follow him because I want to stay on top of this. You don't need to follow him. But one of the things he says is this, like he says that he's finding that instead of the increasing number of organizations who are skipping customized LLM solutions and instead getting a bunch of people in the company ChatGPT Enterprise and then building their own GPTs, and they're getting value from that. So let me translate that into English for you. So essentially he's saying what I've just said. So he said, instead of the old way of doing things, which is get some AI software, train it on your data. That's what he means by customized LLM models. Instead of that, just give a bunch of people access to ChatGPT, put some guardrails around it, and then create and then run some projects around it. Okay, so let me go through this process that I use with my clients, and I think you'll find it useful for yourself as well, for your organization. And by the way, as I go through this process, if you think I need to engage Gihan to help me with this, absolutely do that. This is a significant part of my work now, and I love working with organizations who want to get real value with AI fast. Okay, so let me go through this 5-step process and think about how this could apply to a problem that you're considering and considering solving with AI. Okay, the first step is you identify some AI projects that you're going to do. So as I said, I was working with a client recently around this, and that this is the CEO of the organization. It doesn't have to be the CEO, but some leader. In this case, it was a CEO, and he brought together, we had like 30 of their managers in a room on Monday, just 2 days ago, and they had 6 groups. And each group had to identify from that workshop, from that half day, one AI project that they think might be a goer, that can create some value for them in the next 4 months. Actually, they identified 3. So they identified one which they really want to work on, and 2 backups, so that if the first one didn't work, they'd have 2 understudies who could fill that space. Okay, so that's the first step. And then I think this is a really important step. In the next few weeks, they're going to create a prototype for that particular project that they've decided to embark on. And a prototype, you might think of it as a pilot project, is just a small test so that we can test it out and see whether it's worth continuing and worth pursuing that. So the real value in this is they're trying to get some feedback very, very quickly. And now I've been running these sort of workshops for a while, not with AI. I used to call them disruption by design, and there might even be people in the room who've engaged me for these disruption by design workshops in the past. But the key to it is that now, like when I used to run them in the past, it was difficult to build a prototype in a few weeks. And what we'd say in this stage was, instead of building a prototype, go out and just do a survey of a few customers, or if it's internal, just ask a few key employees about what value they'd get from this. It was difficult to build a prototype, but now it's possible to do that very quickly. In fact, in the workshop on Monday, I demonstrated that for this client. One of the things that I won't go into the details of it, but I said, look, here's one thing that might solve a problem for you, and how long do you think it took me to create using ChatGPT? And some people said 3 hours, 1 hour, 15 minutes, and I said 8 minutes. And they're going, amazing, how could you do that in 8 minutes? And I showed them how to do it. And this is the power of some of these AI tools now, that you can create at least prototypes very, very, very quickly. Okay, so this is the second stage of that process. Then what's going to happen is they come back in a few weeks' time and they do a pitch. So each of the 6 groups, we've got 6 groups there, they're going to do a pitch or a presentation to the group, to the whole group. And it's not like what is this, Shark Tank or Dragon's Den? I never know which one's the Australian version. It's not like that where they're trying to compete. What they're doing is they're presenting their results of the prototype, their findings, and if they now think that there's a project that they can roll out, they're going to say, well, this project over the next 3 months, they're picking small projects over the next 3 months, we're going to implement this. We need a little bit of funding, we need some resources, and we might need some help from IT to enable Copilot for our users and do it properly. And we may need to use some other AI software, so buy or subscribe to some other AI software which now works particularly in this area. Okay, and then they go away for 3 months and they do the project. Okay, so they build something with AI in 3 months. That's really valuable for them. At the end of the 3 months, we get together with the leadership team and just assess the payoff. So what value did we get? What results did we get? And this is the payoff from the project itself and the product that they've created. Okay, and in many cases, it's going to be many, many, many times the time and the investment they put into it. So the idea behind this process is that everyone starts using AI in the organization. They get real value from it, and they're actually using it, and they're learning to use it, and they're implementing it, rather than starting top down and getting the perfect infrastructure to be an AI ready organization. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to, if you've got any questions about the process, so I'll summarize them here for you. One, go and identify some projects, get teams to build prototypes for them, and then they pitch, they present their results, spend the next 3 months building a product, and then assess the payoff. Any questions about that? I'm going to stop now for questions, and the questions about that process or questions about anything else that we've covered so far. I think it's a really powerful process, and I've been, as I said, I've been doing this for years, but without AI. Now that we've got AI tools, it becomes so much easier to create real value at the end of the 4 months that we go through this process. Okay, so I'm just stopping for questions. Type them in the chat if you want to. Okay, so just to respond to Sandra's question. So can you outline an example of a project? Absolutely, Sandra. So the sort of things that I gave you those examples earlier, they're exactly those sort of projects. So the one like create virtual reality. I had another one about, translate some of our videos into multiple languages. That's a really good project. And they can do a prototype, they can test it out, and then if they think it's worthwhile with a particular project, with a particular video, training video, then they can roll it out through the whole organization. Sarah says, when you say get the teams to build a prototype, is that with IT, with an IT specialist team? So no. So Sarah, thank you for asking the question. The prototype is something that they can do themselves without necessarily needing IT support. And that's the key. Again, that's the key. That's a huge benefit of having these now pre-trained AI tools. So many of them are going to ChatGPT and creating the prototype in ChatGPT. The ones that can't be done in ChatGPT, they're asking ChatGPT for advice on how they can build a prototype in a week. Okay, and there are ways that you can prompt ChatGPT to give you some good results in that area. And now, of course, in the workshop that we did, I also explained some of the limitations and the care they've got to take. So they don't necessarily want to upload customer data, confidential customer data, to ChatGPT in building the prototype, but they don't need to. They can upload dummy data or test data for the purpose of building the prototype. And then when they're building the product, that's when they might need that specialist IT help. Okay, can I demonstrate how to do it? Well, not here, not today, but this is actually what I do. This actually demonstrate like building a prototype in the room. I'll demonstrate what's possible, like building that ChatGPT app. I won't go into details. Building the ChatGPT app in 8 minutes. I demonstrated that to the room. Question about, is it about tools and prompts? It's up to them on how to do it. So prototypes are different. Some people absolutely can build it in ChatGPT, others can't. But what they want is something that they can build quickly within a couple of weeks. How independent from IT can you be to introduce a chatbot for policy questions? Can this be standalone? Again, so the answer to that is twofold, Adrian. So people building a prototype don't have to, there's two ways they can do it. One is if they're concerned about whether they have to be, get approval, there are two options. One is in the process of building the prototype, they talk to someone and get the right approvals. The second option is they don't choose that project. Okay, so it sounds like I'm going, oh well, that's a cop-out. No, it's not. Choose a different project that will still add value. Okay, so that's a real outcome of this, is that it's not that the other project is not worthwhile. There are other ways that you can use AI to add value. So Cam Scott says, can you give me some practical examples? Benefit medical admin. Yeah, look, like I spoke at a conference last week, to a large healthcare conference here in Perth, and there are tons and tons of ways that they could run these processes for admin. And it can be admin both in terms of patient experience, but also in terms of just the productivity and stuff that happens around, say, a medical practice, and what they need to do, what else they need to do. So things like, like even simple things like appointment reminders and automating that, and like prioritizing and knowing when clients are coming back for repeat visits, the sort of times that they prefer to come in. So you make the appointments in those times, so they can choose times on a website. So AI can learn with things like that. So yeah, absolutely lots of ways of doing it in admin processes, in admin areas. Okay, good. I'm glad that people are excited and asking me questions about this, because this is really it's actually working. It's working for clients, and I'd love it if more people started doing it this way, because it makes a huge difference when you're thinking about getting real value from AI fast. Okay, just quickly checking to see if there's other chats that have come in. Any other questions? Okay, let's continue. So the third area, hold on. Okay, so Cam, just following on from that, are we limited because the medical software platform and its integrations that we use? So yes, Cam. So I think you're limited when it comes to stage 4. When it comes to building the product, then you might be limited by the platforms that you're using. For the prototype, you don't have to be. And the whole idea of this process is that when you get to stage 3, you're going to pitch to leadership, to leaders and managers, and saying, we've done this little prototype, it costs us very little time and money, and if we can now get a bit of funding or resources, or we handball it over to you to implement, we built the prototype, we know it's going to add value, and now if we need to do it within the software and platforms you've already got, here's a way to do it. And this is the difference between doing it that way and doing it the other way, where you say, first of all, we need IT to enable features of this platform, and I know I work with healthcare organizations, they're really keen on some of these AI tools, but they've got not necessarily far behind, but they've got so much legacy, like old software systems, platforms, infrastructure. Sometimes they're not even connected to each other, let alone up to date. But the whole idea of step 3 is to pitch an idea that say, look, we can do this and it'll add value. And there's another benefit to doing this process, which I'll move on to next. So even if you get your project rejected and it doesn't become a product, or it gets deferred, there's still some other value in it. Okay, yeah, in fact, that leads right on to the next thing I want to talk about, which is this third area. So the third area is the mistake that many leaders make, is they think they need to know it all first. And it might sound like that's exactly like the second mistake, where you want to get things perfect. But the previous one was talking about the organization as a whole. This one is the individual leaders think, I need to know more about AI before we can start using it effectively, before I can let my team use it. It's my responsibility to know more about it. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I am saying that a big part of what you do should be reaching out and engaging people in your team, and even broader than your team. One of my clients, actually former client, because she retired last year, Dr. Nikki Howe, was the CEO of an aged care facility here in Perth, and I interviewed her for my podcast once, and she said this. She said, didn't you employ knowledge workers for their knowledge? And this was long before we were talking about AI and ChatGPT, but she's making the point that there are these smart, savvy, talented people in your team, and they might be the people who are going to lead these AI projects. I always say, and if you've seen some of my other presentations about AI, one of the things I say is find an AI champion in your team. Okay, so don't think that it has to be you alone leading the AI project. Remember the story I told you earlier about when I studied at UWA, and more than 30 years ago I did a computer science thesis about AI. So I was talking to my 19-year-old niece, Abby, because we go out for every couple of months I take her out to dinner and we have a nice chat, because I think this is really important. It's good for me to engage with other members of my family, especially the younger generation, but I also use it as a learning experience and ask Abs what she's doing at uni. I want to know what unis are doing in teaching students at the moment. I want to know what her friends are talking about, war in Gaza and things like that as well. And the last time we went out to dinner, we were talking about AI, because her uni allows her to use it, but with certain restrictions. And I told this story about how I wrote a thesis about AI in my uni degree, and she laughed at that. She said, "Oh, that's so funny." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because like 30 years ago you wrote a thesis about AI, now AI could write your thesis." And I thought, yeah, okay, Abs, not quite yet, but I like the way you're thinking, because it's great to have people who are thinking big, and perhaps she's only about 6 months behind that actually being true, because this AI is moving so fast. So what you want are people in your teams, and you've got the people in your teams. What you want, the people in your teams who are already keen, enthusiastic, excited about using AI, are the ones who are going to step up. And that's why if you reach out and engage the people in your teams. I've got another bit of research for you here. So there's some research done by Amazon AWS. They were talking specifically about Australia, and they call it accelerating AI skills. And so what they're looking at is what's like, how ready are we AI wise in Australia for some of these AI skills. So I've got a poll for you here. Okay, so what percent of employers, according to this research in Australia, don't know how to implement an AI workforce training program? Okay, so you've got A, B, C, and D. Don't type in the numbers, just type in the letter, and we'll see what people are saying. What percent of employers don't say that they don't know how to implement an AI training program? Okay, we're going on the high side here. Oh, someone said G. Oh, 9. Oh, 9. Okay. Okay, so that's good. Thank you everyone for taking part in that. So the correct answer was C, was 70%. And actually might be higher, but people might be optimistic and not willing to say that. The first person to get that answer right was Danny Liston. Congratulations, Danny. So great. Okay, so this is the thing. When I see something like this, when I see a poll question like this, like don't know how to implement an AI workforce training program, I get a bit sad because I think that's not the right way to get people familiar with AI. And you know this because it's exactly what I've been saying all along. The way to get people to use AI is to get people to use AI. Okay, there may be a little bit of training involved so that you put the appropriate guardrails and show them what's possible, but doing AI with these projects, the way I've described it, is a much better way to get people using AI than to do an AI workforce training program. I know there's some educators in the room here, and you're familiar, I'm sure, with this, the 70-20-10 or the 10-20-70 learning model. And broadly, it says that 10% when you're trying to learn something new, 10% of it comes from the expert at the front of the room. So for me, running that workshop on Monday, so I could demonstrate some things, I could share some things, I could open their thinking to what's possible, but that's only going to be 10% of their learning. 20% comes from peers and social interaction, like interacting with other people. In the case of this workshop, there was actually interacting with other leaders in the organization, but of course, in the workplace itself, is interacting with people within their teams as well. But actually, 70% of it comes from on-the-job learning. Okay, so this is actually where you're talking about where the learning really happens. So it's very easy to set up an AI workforce training program, and you do the training, there's a box that's ticked, people learn something, but the real value comes from their on-the-job work. So actually using it. And that's why I think that coming back to a question that somebody asked, I forget who it was, I apologize, but asked earlier, like are you limited if you do this process of like you build a prototype, you present it, you do some experimentation, and then you get stuck because you have to fit in with the implementation and the platforms that your organization is using. I think Cam asked that question. The other value that you get from going through this process is that a lot of the time is spent on the job actually using AI, and you learn that way. Absolutely, you want to put guardrails around it, but you're not waiting for the training program to be rolled out across the whole workforce. So it's a really important value. Whether you use my process or not, get people using AI, experimenting with AI, and getting huge value from it right now. Okay, so I'm going to stop for some more questions, but before I do that, let me tell you about another story of something that happened to me a few weeks ago. A few weeks ago, a client engaged me to speak at a leadership forum, which is a lot of the work that I do, and he engaged me to be the opening keynote speaker for his senior leaders who are coming together for a one-day offsite. And so he's very interested in getting his leaders being future ready. So he asked me to speak about being a future ready leader, which is something I do a lot. I do that a lot. But before I presented, he stood up and he said, before we have Gihan talking about being a future ready leader, let me introduce the people who are going to do a data hackathon today. And so the data hackathon, he got a group of students from a local university who were studying data science, Curtin University, for people who know it here in Perth. They're studying data science, and as part of their course, one of the things they encourage students to do is to get together in groups and solve real world problems. So this manager, this leader of this organization who'd engaged me, had got one of these groups in. In fact, he'd worked with one of them before, but he got one of these groups in, and he said, this is the group. He introduced them to the room and said, this is a group who's going to solve a data problem for us. So one of his managers stood up, and again, I won't say what organization it was, but it was an organization that has a lot of equipment. And what they wanted to do was find out when that equipment was likely to fail. So they were looking at predictive maintenance so that they could do maintenance early rather than waiting for equipment to break down. So at the start of the day, they gave these students this data from within the organization because they were gathering information from these machines, and they had the data, and then they went away and they spent the day solving the problem with this other manager who was helping them, actually not helping them, just answering their questions about what they actually wanted. And by the end of the day, they solved that problem. And that's the whole idea of the hackathon. So these students, these really smart students who are really smart around data and AI and digital, created a solution by the end of the day. Again, I won't tell you exactly what the solution is, but typically the sort of solutions they come up with are they create an AI app, or they create a data dashboard, or they create some way of some sort of SMS alerts to solve that problem. They solved it in a day. And in many organizations, that would take months and sometimes years to solve it if you're trying to do it top down, if you're trying to do the perfect best solution as opposed to the fast solution. And again, do the fast solution, and you might have people in your team who can do things really fast if you give them the right environment to do it and you let them loose on real problems in your organization. Okay, so just before we finish up, questions, final questions, and I'm happy to answer them as we go. If you've got any last questions. Okay, so Diane asked a question: how do you protect your ideas and materials if you're using AI tools to develop them? So there's two parts to that question, Diane. Oh, that's actually two areas where that's important. So one is when you're building the prototype, and the other one is when you're building the product. So quite often the people who do these projects, when they create a product, they might get some customized AI tool to do the product part. For the prototype, quite often they're using ChatGPT or something like that. And in that case, for the prototype, they're not going to share confidential material for building the prototype. Now, okay, this is a big question, so I won't go into this in a lot of detail, but you might say I trust Microsoft Copilot more with our data because we already trust Microsoft with our other data, so we trust Copilot more than ChatGPT, and broadly, that might be something that you choose to do. But yeah, it's a good question. So when you're doing the prototype, you make sure that you're not sharing confidential data. I mean, even ChatGPT allows you to turn off sharing your data, and it's a question of whether you trust it to do that or not. Okay, so we won't go into the details, but broadly I'll say if you're building the prototype, then you may want to use dummy data, test data, and then when you come to the product, then you might use some more precise and rigorous data, rigorous use of the data that you're using. Okay, and there's the same question here from Ashok. Should sensitive data be uploaded? No, you shouldn't. Don't upload sensitive data for your prototype because you don't need it. What you're trying to do is trying to figure out whether you've got a viable product. Krista, a question about do you have any project examples about increasing engagement externally? Absolutely. So for example, that one example I gave earlier was around Facebook program. So doing a Facebook ad program, advertising campaign for 6 months, that's absolutely about increasing engagement. You might be thinking about customer engagement, and that you can do that as well. So definitely you can do things like, AIs. I haven't got clients doing this, but AIs who listen to customer service reps on the making calls and then train them, give them training suggestions afterwards, or have training suggestions sent to the leader, and then the leader and the rep can have a conversation about that in their future training. Okay, good. I can see some lots of thank yous coming in, so I appreciate that. Just got a couple of things to finish up with. There's some things here that sometimes seems a bit obvious to people, but I talk about when you're thinking about making any decision about implementing some software or using some new technology or going in a different direction, it's useful to think about ROI, the return on investment, but also the other part of the decision-making process should be your COI, your cost of inaction. If you don't take action, what are the costs? What are the weaknesses? So things like, you get friction, you get leakage because you're using old systems, or you get preventable errors that take more time in rework than if you could prevent the mistake in the first place. There are opportunity costs because you're not taking advantage of going in a different direction. There's more stress and anxiety because people are frustrated because they're using old software. Okay, so always think about the cost of inaction as well. And my last message for you is a story about when I moved to the Gold Coast in 2006, so almost 20 years ago now. And I moved there because I had a lot of clients in Sydney, and I thought I'm too much of a Perth boy to live in the big smoke in Sydney. But Coolangatta was great because I had an easy flight to Sydney from there. And when I went there, I decided I wanted to learn surfing because I was in an apartment right on the beach. And so I went for a couple of lessons, and then I had a problem with my shoulder and I couldn't swim. So surfing was a bit dangerous. But I remember the first time I went out surfing with the instructor, and it was just a small group of us, 5 or 6 of us. And one of us asked the question, said, how do you know when there's a good wave out there to go out and catch? And he said, you don't wait on the shore and do that. So the best surfers, and if you want to be anywhere good at surfing, what you do is you paddle out already, and then you wait for the wave. If you're standing on the shore, then you're too late. And this may be really obvious, but to me, I thought that was really interesting. I think the same is true with many of the changes that are happening in our world now, and especially with something like AI. Don't stand on the shore waiting until things are perfect, until you can see the perfect wave. You have to start paddling so that you are ready to then catch that wave when it comes your way. Okay, so my last message for you is start before you're ready. Don't wait for the world to be perfect. Don't wait until you think AI is perfect or your organization is perfectly positioned to use AI. Start before you're ready. If you'd like to work with me, particularly around this AI process, I'm having a lot of success with this with a number of different clients, and I can pretty much guarantee that you'll get many, many times a return on investment working with me through this whole project, through this whole process. Also, if you're interested in me doing part of that, like doing just a masterclass initially, without the rest of the process, I do that as well, and also speak about AI from a human-centric viewpoint at conferences. All my details are at gihanperera.com. Thanks everyone. I see lots of thank yous coming through. I'll see you in the future.